fly chick coming through. Nice to meet you, glad you came too. Like you said, when you know you got moves. You spit game and you know you spit.
Hello and welcome back to the Fastlane Collective. It has felt like years since we've come on and had a conversation about all things F1. But before we get into our new segment and all about Austria, the crazy Grand Prix we had this weekend, Daniella, how are you? What have you been up to?
I am really well, thank you, Yas. I've just come back from a lovely holiday in Italy, so I'm feeling tanned, I'm feeling rejuvenated and ready to talk all things Austria, but I'm also very much ready for this weekend. It's the British Grand Prix. I am going to be doing the British Grand Prix in a very different way than I have done in previous years. But all will be revealed in next week's episode, so I'm going to keep it a secret and I'll let you all know what I get up to and what I'm doing, because it's going to be a whole different perspective. How are you, Yas?
I am great, and guys, you will definitely want to hear about what Daniella is getting up to. As I was going to say, actually, Brianna is not with us today. She is a very busy woman, but you will see her next week, I'm sure. But yes, Daniella is going to be up to something very, 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 very secretive until she's finished up, and I just can't wait to talk about it on the podcast next week. But I've been fine. I finished up my year at uni, just working away and trying to absorb all things F1, get back into the momentum of just having like my full attention absorbed by these fast cars. So, to start us off, let's talk about Checo. Yes, Checo Perez, somebody we haven't really heard much of since he left the paddock. But Checo has been discussing his old team on a podcast recently and not talking very, very well about them, let's just say. He has mentioned how the team is falling apart since key team members have left the team. And Checo talked about it in a very somber way. He even said in the podcast, because I was listening to it before we got on here, that a lot of people think that he will be pleased to see that Red Bull are really not where they were, especially from last year. But he's actually quite somber about it. Daniella, what is your kind of thoughts with Checo speaking out and talking about the team? Because Checo has mentioned that he still wants to come back to Red Bull. He wants to come back to F1. Do you think this was a smart choice for him to, I guess, talk negatively about his old team?
It did surprise me, actually. I kind of thought that he was just going to kind of go, like, slip under the radar and kind of leave it at that and not speak out about Red Bull and about how his situation was back when he was driving for them. So I was quite shocked that he did come out and start speaking about it. I can see where he's coming from in the fact that, like, Red Bull have lost a lot of key members of their team. Adrian Newey being a massive person that has now obviously departed and gone to Aston Martin. So I think I understand where he's coming from in that sense, but I also don't know if it necessarily was kind of the right move. Like, I know he's saying that he doesn't wish Red Bull to have a downfall or anything like that, but if you want to go back to being at Red Bull, then I think maybe you shouldn't really talk about how, like, they negatively have been impacted by members of staff leaving. I don't think that's really going to put you in the best position to get back there. But it's interesting to hear his thoughts and opinions on it all, as someone who used to race them like himself. So I think that I'm like, for like the drama of it, I'm like, oh, I want to hear what you have to say. But I think in terms of career progression, if you want to get back to Red Bull, you might have made a mistake there, Checo. Do you agree, Yas?
Oh, 100%. Like, I love hearing the drama, the ins and outs of things that we don't get to see on track. But I definitely agree with you that maybe it's, still a bit too soon to talk about his time at Red Bull. I don't think Helmut Marko or Christian Horner will be too happy to hear what has been said, but I still don't see them wanting Checo back anyway. I think Red Bull has had this pressure from media and from, other team members that, they have such a backlog of talent in their young driver program that to pick from there and not kind of go back to picking drivers that have had their time at Red Bull. But that's another conversation for another time. So moving on to our next piece of news, the FIA. I think every week we do a podcast, we talk so negatively about the FIA, and there might be a potential rule shakeup incoming. So after Red Bull has kind of continuously protested multiple issues throughout this season, the FIA is reportedly reviewing how protests and stewarding are handled. This could change how race penalties and rulings play out next season by implementing a fine. Daniella, do you think this is a smart thing for the FIA to be looking at, or do you think the FIA kind of have bigger problems to look at than just people basically raising a complaint?
I think I do have bigger problems because the FIA is falling apart as we speak. Many people have left. It's trying to become a dictatorship. It's just not working out, let's be real. But however, I do think that actually this could be an interesting yet possibly good rule that's potentially coming into place. So how this all came about, Max Verstappen and Red Bull protested against Mercedes and George Russell after the Canadian Grand Prix, and that caused a 5-hour delay after the race for it to be reviewed and for all of this to kind of come to some conclusion. And the likes of Toto Wolff came out and said that this didn't seem fair because people then had to stay behind, they had extra long days, people missed their flights, all for it to be that, the results stayed the same. And Toto Wolff has kind of come out and said that he thinks that if you have legs to stand on and you things are definitely wrong and you want to protest because that this is going to better the sport and it's going to change the result in the way that is favourable for everyone, then go for it. But in this instance, it just wasted a lot of people's time, and it's the second time that Red Bull have done this, and so they're going to kind of look into potentially giving a fine to a team if it happens hours after the race, it causes a delay and the result doesn't change, because it is just a little bit of a waste of time. And as Toto said, and I kind of agree with this, he said something along the lines of they were just trying to come up with what they could say, how are they going to get George's win taking off him, what were they planning on using against him. And I do kind of agree with that. It felt very much that they didn't really know what he'd done wrong. They just wanted to come up with an excuse, and that's what they did. And it then just took forever for it to kind of get sorted. And there's nothing for me more frustrating as a fan than when you've watched a race and then 5+ hours later the result changes. And you're like, why couldn't this have been resolved at the end of the race? Why have we now had to wait 5 hours later and the result has changed? And I know that in this case it didn't, but there have been times when this has happened, and not just in F1. It's happened in Formula E, where last year, I think it was the Italian race, they reviewed the car, it was ridiculous, maybe 5+ hours after the race, and the driver who won got disqualified. Now, for us as broadcasters, that messed things up completely because all of our standings are wrong, our results are wrong. That meant that our highlights then went out wrong because it happened so late in advance. If the FIA act quickly, we have time to then change these before they go out on air. We did not have time to change it. We didn't have time for our commentator to revoice it. We didn't have time to make new graphics. It had been too late at that point that everyone had gone home, and it becomes very frustrating. As part of my job, I have to wait after the race until the FIA have made all of their decisions and have given the final standings before I'm allowed to go home. That can take up to 2-3 hours, and I'm expected to stay. So I find it frustrating, not only as a fan, but also as someone who works in the sport, where I have to then wait such a long time for the FIA to make decisions on things. If this was the Max and George incident, I would be frustrated if I was working on it, because I'd have had to stay 5 hours later. Sometimes people don't get paid for that, and that's just how it is. But it's frustrating. So I think this is going to be a good thing, and I hope that other people see it in the same way that I do. I think that we need to start putting kind of a time limit on when results can be changed. And I know that rules are rules, and I understand that, you know, if someone breaks these rules, then they need to be reprimanded. But it's frustrating when it happens so late. So hopefully this will help with stupid claims that kind of end up taking up and wasting a lot of people's time.
Yeah, it's definitely unfair for the people that work in the sport. Yeah, like you mentioned, missing flights, you might not get paid, and I know in the whole scheme of things, especially from like a driver's perspective, you know, they're focusing on the result and, you know, what affects the constructors, but you can't even think about everyone in this situation, especially when it's such a delay, like 5 hours. But I wouldn't put it past the FAA to kind of not do anything. I know there's been obviously talk of, we might implement a rule or a fine, but teams might just want to break that fine anyway if it could get them that extra point. And you know what the FIA is like. They're so wish-washy with their rules sometimes that I think they'll be very lenient. But I hope that this rule does come into effect. It might not be for next year, but maybe in coming years they might be able to hone down a rule. Add to the big fat book of FIA rules. Add another one in there, why not? Speaking of next year, 2026 is going to be a big year for Formula One. I think it's the year that we've all been talking about for the last couple of years, because rules are changing, specs are changing. It's going to be exciting. This is the time to get into Formula One. Next year is definitely going to be the time you want to pay attention to. And the FIA has approved a 5-day private test on the early specs of these cars. This is going to be so exciting. Like, Daniela, I'm sure you're just excited as me to see what these cars are going to be like, because it can really switch up the grid. I know at the minute we have McLaren here on top, but do you think that the 2026 cars in this 5-day private test is really going to show where the grid's going to be next year?
I'm going to say no, mostly because testing comes with a lot of sandbagging. It comes with a lot of different variables. Each team will take this test in a different way. Some might be focusing completely on setup. Some might be just getting in as many lap times as they can. Like, everyone does it differently. So I feel like you can't really gauge from testing too much what the grid's going to look like, who are going to be the top teams, who are going to be the bottom teams. It's not really how testing works. However, I am very excited for it. I think 5 days is a good amount of time for these drivers to get behind that wheel and really perfect the car and get used to how it's going to run. It's going to be a whole different ball game for everyone, and I think that they need the time to adjust before they go out for the first Grand Prix weekend of the year. I like that it's in different locations. It does mean then more travel and more flights and more damage to the environment, but I think that it's nice that we kind of get to see it at 3 different circuits. We can see how it works and on different surfaces, different types of tracks. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But I don't think it's really gonna be gospel of who's gonna be where. But I think it could give us a little bit more of an understanding. I know that this year we kind of saw McLaren were topping the timesheets a lot consistently throughout testing, and obviously then they have been very consistently at the top the rest of this season, with both drivers leading the Drivers' Championships, they're first and second, and they're also leading the Constructors' Championship. So I could be proven wrong, and we could have a similar thing where that happens again in 2026, but I don't think it's going to be the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, I'm expecting a lot of teething issues, a lot of things going wrong. Yeah, it's going to be a hard one. Like, I didn't see if they're going to be broadcasting any of the private tests. Probably not. As much as I would love to see what the cars look like and, kind of which car just bursts up in flames. But I think it's going to be very exciting to see the next couple of years of Formula One. We can see teams who are on the back of the grid move up, or teams that are on the top move down. So it's going to be very exciting. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for the next couple of years of Formula One. And of course, we will be here to cover it all as usual. You'll have to put up with us for a bit longer. So lastly, in our news section, I just wanted to talk about the F1 movie. Now, we're going to be doing a whole separate episode kind of diving into it a bit more, but there's been some complaints, some issues about kind of how females have been portrayed throughout this film. I've seen the movie, Daniella hasn't, but Daniella, from what you've been kind of seeing on social media, are you looking forward to watching this movie and like doing a review on this podcast? How are you feeling?
I'm really, really apprehensive about going to see this film. The reason I haven't is because it came out whilst I was on holiday. As we're recording this, I only got back from my holiday yesterday. I've been at work all day today. I initially had planned to go and see it tonight, but then we moved our filming to today. So I am yet to see it, but I also am like, do I really want to go and see it? Like, I'm really nervous about it. I've heard very mixed things. I've heard that, you know, some of the racing elements are quite fun and exciting, but not that realistic. And I've heard that the portrayal of women is really awful. And that's the thing that scares me the most. I had said to Yaz privately over message that, you know, I thought with the likes of Lewis Hamilton coming in, that we were going to have better representation. I thought we were going to have more people of colour. I thought that Lewis was going to be able to have a little bit more control in how this film came about and how it ended up. Ultimately, I don't think that he did have as much power as I thought he was going to have going into it. And so, unfortunately, we have lost females that were going to be in it, people of colour, POC women who were going to be in it that I thought were going to be amazing in it, and then kind of got cut out at the last minute. There is, I believe, again, I haven't seen it, so yes, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a romantic relationship between a race engineer and a driver, which, when we've only just now got our first ever F1 female race engineer in 2025, it's the first time this has happened, it is actually really frustrating to then see that a film who also has a female F1 race engineer is then only in it because she dates a driver or has a romantic relationship with a driver. And I just find it so frustrating, because I thought we were finally getting somewhere with representation within this sport, and then we have a film that's gone out worldwide for everyone to see, where again women are being degraded for literally no reason. We're not here because we think the drivers are hot, and if we were, that's completely fine. We are here because we're allowed to be fans of the sport. We're here because we're passionate about racing. For those of us that work in the sport, we're here because we're good at our jobs and we like what we do and we have fun and we have the skill set for it, we have the qualifications for it. I'm not working in motorsport because I want to have a romantic relationship with a driver. I work in motorsport because I love motorsport and I love racing. I love wheel-to-wheel battles. I love the adrenaline. I'm not here for any other reason aside from that. And to think that that narrative has now been pushed out into the world when it was already out there, but they've just perpetrated it even more. As someone who works in the sport, it is really, really hard to watch and hear people talk about this. It just feels very glossed over of like, yeah, well, that's all women are here for, to be with a driver. And that's not the case. I just find it so hard. And it doesn't help when we're in a world of being labelled DTS fans and being told that we only like the drivers because they're good looking. We've had team principals come out and say that. Christian Horner has said that himself. It's frustrating. I keep saying it. It's the only word I can use to describe it, because it really genuinely is so infuriating that we're in 2025 we're finally thinking that we're going to get some accurate representation. Oh, how amazing is it that we're going to have this female F1 race engineer in a film doing a fantastic job, proving the whole world wrong, having a race winner driver. And instead, this is what we get given. Yaz, are you feeling the same about this? Or did you've seen it? Did you see it in a completely different way? Is it completely different than what I've got in my head?
The frustrating thing about it is that, like, the female characters are kind of, like, even though she's a race engineer, it's only when Sonny, who's the main character, like, he gives her, like, the ideas that makes the car amazing. And, like, she's the engineer, she should know about that. And there's also another character, a female pit crew member, and she messes up a pit stop and she is fumbling about and doesn't really know what to do. And it's like, anytime there's a female character, it's like they need a male to kind of save the day in a way. And that's where my frustration came from, because I thought the film itself, like, the cinematography was very good, and I thought the story was cheesy, but, like, it's Hollywood, you know, and I think it really could have got a lot more people interested into F1, but I just hate how, again, as usual, how women were portrayed. And I know that some people were saying, well, she's a woman, she can do what she wants, she can, you know, have relationships with a driver. But I think from a standpoint as me and you who's trying to work in the industry, and you who does, it's something that gets thrown our way a lot of, oh, you're just interested in how hot the drivers are, and do you actually know anything about the sport? You're just a DTS fan. And yeah, that, when I was watching it, like, my eye was twitching. I was like, oh no, like, we could have had such a better storyline with these women. And frustration, like you mentioned, Daniela, it was just, like, really disappointing to see. And I expected, like you said, Lewis Hamilton was involved in this project, and he has so much support for women in motorsport and the F1 Academy, and women who work behind the scenes as well. So yeah, I was disappointed. Yeah, but we're gonna have a deep dive into that in the next couple of weeks about about the F1 film, and just kind of have a big discussion about it when Brianna is back and joins us. So moving on from frustration and getting annoyed at the sexism of the sport sometimes, let's move on to the amazing Austrian Grand Prix. I mean, a beautiful track. I would love to go to the Hungaroring and just see one of these races live in action. But Lando Norris was just on a flyer this weekend. He qualified P1, he won from pole, and this is the third consecutive win for Lando this season. Also, we had Oscar in P2, a very early battle with him and Lando Norris. Also, Oscar was lapped in traffic, which ruined his final charge. Colapinto was to blame for that one with the blue flags. Firstly, Daniela, with Lando on top, did you think during qualifying that Lando would keep this P1 finish? Because throughout the race, especially when Oscar and Lando were having these battles, I really thought that Oscar was going to take the lead and win it again and widen that 15-point gap.
I did also think that Oscar was going to take the lead at multiple points throughout the race, and he did at moments take the lead, but then Lando came straight back at him, which, like, hats off to Lando, because I was not expecting. I think it was a really, really fantastic battle between the two of them. It kept me very engaged for a really long period of time, and I think that it was what we kind of needed from this race. I think it would have been interesting if we'd seen Oscar kind of break that gap even further from Lando and kind of, you know, prove what he's capable of. But I think Lando he knew that he needed these points. He knows that if he wants to win that Drivers' Championship, that it's him versus Oscar, and that is it. Like, it's just the two of them. And I think that's when, you know, this whole thing kind of really came into play. We got these really great battles. I wasn't really expecting it to happen. I thought that it was going to take Oscar a little bit of time to get past Leclerc and get up to fighting against Lando. I did kind of think that if Lando had a good start, he was just going to pave the way and just keep going, and no one would be able to catch him. But then ultimately, obviously Oscar did, but was unsuccessful in actually passing him and making it stick. But I think that it was a good exciting battle between the two of them. And I liked how it played out, and I think that Lando deserved that win. He worked really hard for it. When it comes to Lando taking pole, I do get a bit nervous that he is going to mess up the start, because he is kind of notoriously known for not having a good start when he starts on pole. But it was a pretty decent start from him. He held his own, and I did quite enjoy this race.
Like I mentioned, there's now a 15-point gap between Oscar and Lando for the Drivers' Championship, and this was also McLaren's first 1-2 since Qatar. Do you think that McLaren should implement more team orders with, having like a clear who's the number one driver, or do you think that this is fair how McLaren are running their races?
I find this question really difficult because I just don't know what the right answer is anymore. Like, sometimes I'm like, they need to be clearer. If, like, last year they wanted Lando to win the Drivers' Championship, they should have literally given it all to Lando. They should have made him their number one driver. And then they messed it all up, and it was a nightmare, and that's when the whole McLaren rules thing came in. But then this year they've kind of gone that similar approach of, like, not really saying they have a number one driver, but I think that it is kind of working at the moment because they're both 1 and 2. Like, they're both consistently at the top of the standings. The gap isn't that big that I feel like it is unfair, because if next race, I'd say for example at the British Grand Prix, Oscar was to DNF and Lando was to win, well then Lando would be leading the championship. So I just feel like right now they can't choose a number one driver, and I feel like we've said that the whole season up until this point. They can't choose number one driver because it's too close. But I genuinely think it is. So actually, I think maybe they have got the strategy right this time by not having a number one driver. But that's just because you can't choose a number one driver right now. Like, it's not going to work in the way that you think it will. I think if they were to choose number one driver, I think if they were to choose Oscar's going to get a lot of hate. Yaz told me before we jumped on that Oscar already is getting a lot of hate. And if it was to go to Lando, everyone would say, yeah, well, he's second in championship though, so why is he the number one driver? So I just feel like either way, it's not going to work. It could flip-flop. Lando could take the lead of the championship. Oscar could continue to hold his own and extend that gap even further. Right now, it's just too hard to say. Jans, are you kind of feeling the same thing, or do you think that McLaren have completely got it wrong?
I'm like totally with you, which is why I asked you the question, because I hate answering this question as well, because it's so difficult. Like, having team orders, okay, you've got to clear this person's number one driver and you can work the whole strategy around them. And then when you leave it up to just kind of fate with two drivers that are close together, that's when incidents happen. And, you could throw, like, nobody could win the Drivers' Championship from that team. And it's so... I love watching a team just let the drivers do what they do best, and who's ever in front at that moment to kind of help guide them along. But I know from a driver's perspective, it's hard, especially from Lando, who's been in McLaren when McLaren were doing so poorly, like so poorly. He probably feels in a way that it's his time now, it's his time to shine. But it's a difficult one. I'm like, yes, but also no. Like, it's great that they have no number one driver, but it's also bad. Or, at least they're not Ferrari, who kind of flip-flop between who's number one and just change their mind. But yeah, we'll get to Ferrari later on. So it's a difficult one. Very hard. But kind of moving on to what you mentioned there very briefly about the kind of public hate that Piastri has been getting. Obviously, we're leading up to the British Grand Prix this weekend. I'm sure Lando is feeling a lot of pressure from fans to do it for McLaren, which is a British team. But Lando Norris probably spoke out in post-race interviews saying, don't paint him as the villain, and he's referring to Oscar Piastri. Danielle, do you think this is like one of the most mature things Lando has done, because we know ourselves how toxic this fan base can be. Do you think this will be something that will encourage fans to kind of just not be so nasty to Piastri and just let the team fight it out?
I wasn't expecting Lando to say something on this matter, but I also didn't realise that Oscar was getting hate, as I kind of briefly mentioned earlier. So I think that it was good of Lando to come out and say this. It was very mature of him. I don't think I've seen a moment quite like this with him. And that kind of made me be like, oh, okay, Lando, you have matured more than I thought you had. And this has put him, I feel like, in a good position going into the British Grand Prix, because he's kind of put fans on his side. He's gone, right, guys, I'm not standing for this behaviour. You can support me, that's fine, but you're not going to start bullying someone else. And I like the fact that he's come out publicly and said this, especially as we approach the British Grand Prix. He could have let this slide. It's happened in the past where other drivers have let it slide. I don't think that was fair. I think that Lando's done the right thing to call these fans out and say, whoa, this is not okay. We don't do this in this sport. And as you said, this sport can be quite toxic. The fans can be very toxic. There have been many issues at Grand Prix that people have been to where fans have been nasty to each other. I don't like that part of the sport. I think that it's not needed. We don't need it in our sport. It can go away. It won't, because everyone seems to have an opinion, and people don't like it if you disagree with them. But I think that obviously Lando's going to be the favourite for the win this year. And so I think there's going to be a lot riding on him. The question I have, though, is how will Lando cope with it? Because we've seen before when Lando has kind of let the pressure get to him a little bit, and it's made him make mistakes. It's made him have a poor race start. It's made him make moves that he probably shouldn't have done, like back in Canada. So I think that my focus now is on Lando and how he's going to do, rather than on Oscar. Like, if Oscar wins, like, that's going to be amazing. I'm going to be happy because I'm an Oscar fan. But I think that my focus is still towards Lando, and I think he's done that for me by coming out and speaking publicly about the hate that Oscar is getting.
Yeah, I was just as surprised as you were. I've seen some of like the nasty things that have been said to Oscar online, but I myself didn't know that it was getting that bad, and it's such a shame, because how can you hate Oscar? I mean, he seems like such a sweet, lovely guy who just wants to race and get his points, and you know, he's done so well from the last couple of years that he's been in the sport, and it was just such a shame to see all the hate that he's been getting. But like you mentioned, the sport can be very toxic. So I'm hoping for the British Grand Prix that we don't see much hatred towards him, especially if Oscar wins, because I'll be nervous for him just for the hatred. So hopefully not. But moving on to another British team, Williams. Let's start with Carlos Sainz, who we had to have an aborted race start because he couldn't get his car out of first gear. Williams have just been having a lot of reliability issues. Carlos Sainz just failed to make a start. He had to start his car, and he managed to get it out of gear, and then he drove to the pit lane, and then the back of his car just went on fire. So retirement, and then you move on to Alex Albon, who had to retire shortly after pitting. This was just not the weekend for Williams, especially when Carlos had a crash in quali as well. Daniella, where do we even start here? We have seen so much reliability issues with Williams, even from the last couple races. Do you think it's going to get any better throughout this season, or is this just going to be a problem for Williams until next year?
They had such a brilliant start to the season. The best they've had since, I want to say, since 2016 or something. It was brilliant. I loved it. And I was like, hey, this is it. Williams are back. And then the reliability issues started to become a little bit of a problem. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just a blip. This is fine. But I feel like I've been saying that for the last like 3 or 4 episodes. It's just a blip. It's just a blip. It's not just a blip. They are having some real reliability problems, and it pains me so much because they were finally getting somewhere. It looks like they were going to have a brilliant year. The things were going to finally go their way. And now they're just being struck each week with a new problem. And I'm just like, no, I can't take this. No, we're not doing this. This is just not okay. So, Williams, can we please figure out what this is? Because I'm hurting a lot. And I can't keep watching your cars retire because it's just too painful. And please don't do it at the British Grand Prix. Like, come on, let's get some decent points, and then everyone could be happy, and it'll be all lovely. I don't want to see a DNF at the British Grand Prix from Williams. It's too painful right now.
Yeah, it would hurt so much because, like you said, they started off so well. It kind of gave me that. Not to the same extent, but Aston Martin a couple of years ago, they started off so well, doing so great, and then it just nosedived. With these reliability issues, it seems to be like a different thing each week. I couldn't really find out what happened with Alex for some reason. It was just like, yeah, we had to retire the car. But having Carlos Sainz not even being able to get his car out of first gear and having to abort the whole start, and his car going on fire, there just seems to be issue after issue. And also, Carlos seems to have like a running theme with his car going on fire at this track. Like, it happened before in his Ferrari. I'm just glad this time he wasn't trying to get out of the car and it was rolling backwards down the hill. So that was one positive.
Literally read my mind. I was thinking about it and I was watching it in my head of him going backwards. I remember being so stressed and being like, stop the car, get out of the car. And I was in a pub watching that with some friends, and this man came up to him and he's going to be okay, he'll get out. There are people there to help him. And I was like, no, he's not getting out of the car. And so when his car caught on fire, I just have flashbacks to that moment, and I was like, not again. No, we can't be doing this. Not again.
We can't get the public to console you again in the pub. But literally as soon as I saw the fire, I was like, here we go. This is just the thing that happens to Carlos now. Like, we know he's spicy, but we don't need to have his car set alight. Like, let's stop this. So moving on, we have the Max and Kimi crash. Again, lap 1. This is Max's first DNF of the 2025 season. And it really damaged Red Bull's morale and their championship outlook. I mean, we had Helmut Marko saying that this was a black day. I quote, a black day for Red Bull. And even Christian Horner mentioning how it's a 2-horse race now. It's just the McLarens who have the constructors and also has the driver standings in their favour. Daniela, do you think... Well, first of all, we'll talk about what Helmut Marko and Christian Horner have been talking about, because I thought that was very interesting. Usually Red Bull kind of keep a brave face even when they're doing really poorly, but this surprised me just how low the morale was. Do you think it was kind of a stupid move for a team to talk so badly really about their weekend, or do you think they're being honest and just being honest with their fans?
I'm not really too sure. I think they are being honest. I think that they've just kind of not had the season that they were expecting. Max has been in a few different dramas over the last few races, and I think that, they've kind of started to realise that they're not where they wanted to be or where they thought they were going to be, and it is kind of reflecting badly on them. And I think they've kind of gone, you know what, we're just going to have to say, this is it. Championship's over. Right, we're not going to win it. It is what it is. Which is fine, but we've still got so much of the season to go that I almost feel like, why are you throwing in the towel now? You don't know what's going to happen in the second half of the season. You don't know that your upgrades might make you stronger and McLaren might fall back a little bit. We don't know that. And I'm not saying that that's definitely going to happen, because it is kind of unlikely. But I think it is unfair to kind of just, throw in the towel now, when there's still so much time to go. But I can see where they're coming from. It has kind of not been the greatest, and Max has definitely not been up there in the way that I think he was hoping to. I think he was hoping to challenge those McLarens a lot more than he has. He just hasn't, and the DNF was kind of the cherry on top of the cake, I guess. It wasn't what he wanted, and I think he handled it quite well. He didn't really blame Kimi and kind of just said, like, it is one of those things, which I was not expecting from Max, because when he did have that incident with Kimi, his team radio, like, you could tell he was really annoyed, but then afterwards he kind of was like, you know, these things happen, and I know that it wasn't personal, and it was just an accident. And that did surprise me that Max came out and said that, especially about a rookie, because I feel like sometimes he kind of jumps the gun a little bit and thinks, can sometimes thinks that everyone's out to get him, which is not the case at all. So I'm glad that, you know, him and Kimi are kind of fine about the situation. I think that, you know, Max will take it in his stride and he'll come back at the British Grand Prix and, like, do really, really well. But they are not where they wanted to be. And I think when you've gone from kind of winning everything to now, like, barely getting a race win, you're gonna find it difficult, and you're gonna be frustrated.
It definitely surprised me, just kind of how up and honest they were, and just how they said it how it is. And I think that's probably because they know how bad the car is this season. I mean, throughout practice, quali, the race, Max for like half a lap of the race for Max, he continuously said, no grip, this car just has no grip. And, you know, with Yuki, which we'll get onto later on, with just his result as well, I think the team as a whole is just kind of, I guess, licking their wounds a wee bit. So, not the best time for Red Bull. But Kimi Antonelli did receive a 3-place grid penalty for the upcoming race in Silverstone. Do you think this was fair for him to get this penalty, or do you think, you know, Kimi tried to turn the car and he just couldn't, he locked up, it was a racing incident and he shouldn't be punished for it?
You know what, I'm not really sure, and I hadn't really thought about it until you brought it up. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm really not sure. How do you feel?
I think a 3-place grid penalty is harsh. I think if anything, I don't know. From looking on the onboards, especially from Kimi, I think the cars in front of him, he didn't expect him to brake so suddenly, so he jolted out, and then he locked up because he couldn't get the car turned and just went into Max. I mean, he almost went into Lewis Hamilton, but Lewis Hamilton just missed him by like a little tiny fraction. So I do see it as a racing incident. I think the 3-place grid penalty is a bit harsh for Kimi, but hopefully he makes up those places in the race and he qualifies good, because I would hate to see Kimi be disadvantaged from this penalty, especially when even Max himself was kind of like, yeah, you know, it happens. You know, I think it would be different, especially if we heard Max being really annoyed about it. But also, as you mentioned, Kimi and Max kind of talked about it after the race, and they're on good terms, which is good. So kind of a hard one to read. Me personally, I see it as a racing incident, but I know a lot of people will have different opinions. So talking about the other Red Bull driver, we're going to talk about Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki, it's hard watching you at the minute. It's really hard. So Yuki qualified P18. He also spun I cannot speak. He spun Franco in the race, and then he finished last in the race. That second Red Bull seat is a curse. Is such a curse. And even Liam Lawson, who finished P6, he had his best F1 finish, post-race was being bombarded with questions by interviewers of, should you have that seat back? You know, what, like, the seat is cursed. Do you think Yuki should be kicked out? Blah, 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 blah. Basically, my long-winded question, Daniela, is, do you think Red Bull have a serious issue with this second seat? Do you think it's far too tailored for Max, for anyone, not just Liam or Yuki or any talented driver? Do you think it is killing their team?
Oh, absolutely. We all know that second Red Bull seat is cursed and no one is going to make it better. I don't know what they need to do to sort it all out, but it's just not working at all. I don't think that, just because Liam got one P6 that he should now be back in that Red Bull seat. I do think that, it would be nice if Yuki was doing better, because right now, again, Red Bull just having to rely on one driver. And I know that it's worked in previous seasons, but it's just not sustainable long term, especially when they're not in the position that they have been. I just think that, they need to kind of look at what is going on in that second seat. I think partly it could be down to the fact that these cars are built around one person and one person only. And that is the problem here. You can't expect someone to adapt to a car that is only made for Max Verstappen. It's not going to work. It's partly the reason that Daniel Ricciardo left in 2018. He was sick of Max being the favourite. That every adaptation they made to that car was always in favour of Max. And it's continued massively. It's why Max has won four World Championships. Is it 4 or 5? I feel like we've had this conversation before. 4. Why is this the one stat that I forget? What a really bad motorsport researcher I am. But it's just like all the time that they just develop the car more and more to suit Max's style, and that second driver is completely forgotten. Now, it doesn't help that Yuki wasn't in that seat from the beginning. Like, if Red Bull had signed him from the start, they could have worked with him to, come up with a setup that really worked for him in the car beforehand, and kind of make it more adaptable to him in the early stages. But that wasn't going to be the case. They had signed Liam Lawson first, and even then for Liam it didn't suit him either, and that's why I think he is doing better in the racing bulls. But also there's just a lot less pressure that being with racing bulls than there is with Red Bull. I don't know what they need to do, but they need to sort it out. I do think it is the fact that it is primarily made for Max, and that is the problem. I do think there probably are other problems. I couldn't say what they are right now, but it is just hard to watch, and I'm just kind of, as probably many other fans are, a little bit fed up that no one else can hack that second seat.
I just don't understand how Red Bull, how many drivers have we seen fail in that second seat? We had Ricciardo, we had Alex Albon, Liam Lawson, now Yuki Tsunoda. The list is as long as my arm, probably longer. And it just keeps going and going and going. And I don't understand how a team, they don't sit and go, right, there's a continuous issue of talented drivers just not being able to work this car. What do we need to do to adapt to this, make it easier? What's the problem? I just don't understand that. How do you not as a team want to get maximum points? It baffles me. And I know there's a lot of politics within Red Bull. I think we hear it each week, so many things changing, and just the team is not a happy place at the minute. And I think that reflects on the second seat as well. That Red Bull need to really sit down, especially for 2026 when there's going to be so many shakeups. They need to have a game plan of what they're going to do with that second seat, because they can't keep just switching drivers in and out. I'm honestly waiting for them to say, okay, Yuki's out. And I don't want that, because I think Yuki is such a talented driver, and I think Liam Lawson should have been given a lot more time as well. It's just so frustrating, and I could just get angrier and angrier. But Red Bull, sort your shit out, please. Thank you. I'm going to move on before I want to smash my laptop. So our next subject is Leclerc and Hamilton. Ferrari actually had a pretty good finish this weekend, which this feels odd to say because they've been so up and down throughout the standings, I think, so far. So Leclerc finished P3 and Hamilton finished P4, which now means that Ferrari are ahead of Mercedes in the constructors. Daniela, do you think Lewis Hamilton is feeling good right now that he's beating his old team?
If I was Lewis Hamilton, I would be feeling good right now. I was not expecting this performance from Ferrari. I missed qualifying, and I sat with my cousin and he was like, right, I want you to predict who is where after qualifying. And I was like, okay, that's fine, we can do this. So I predicted that one of the McLarens was going to be first, and I predicted that the other one was going to be second, and then I predicted that George Russell was going to be third. And I was wrong. I was wrong because that was not the case. Yes, that one of the McLarens was first, but then we had Charles Leclerc in second. Then we had Oscar Piastri, and then my biggest surprise, we had Lewis Hamilton. That really, really surprised me. Now, I've been quite lenient with Lewis. I've said that, you know, he's with a new team. He's really got to adjust. I'm not expecting amazing things from him. But I think as a whole and as a collective, F1 fans were hoping for a lot more from him than he's given this season. And I know that some of it is down to the team. The communication is very poor, as we've kind of said in previous episodes. And I just felt like, okay, you know, I'm not expecting great things. I was not expecting for him to be able to kind of keep a hold of being in the top 5. I thought he would dip out. Like, I kind of thought he was, like, I was shocked that he wasn't more involved in that Kimi accident, and I kind of thought that that might have, you know, had an effect on him in some way, and it clearly didn't. He took home 4th. Leclerc taking 3rd, also was not expecting. Thought he was going to drop back. I thought George was going to make his way up through the field and take back a podium position, and that didn't happen. And so I'm really pleased with Ferrari this weekend. I'm really happy to see them doing well. I think it was very much earned. Yaz, we know that you have some real struggles when it comes to Ferrari. You get very frustrated with the team dynamics, the lack of communication. How are you feeling after this weekend?
Oh, I'm feeling just kind of like a sigh of relief because we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere, Ferrari. If you've listened to our episodes before, you've probably just heard me shouting, especially about Ferrari, because, oh my gosh, their communication irritates me to my core. I'm just happy that whether they have communication or not, that they're getting points. Probably Leclerc himself is doing his own race strategy, and Hamilton has probably learned from that at this point because Ferrari are just all over the place. But I'm happy to see that we're making progress, and I really hope that we continue to make progress throughout the rest of the season and onto the next couple of seasons as well. I'm just happy for the team. Like, that must boost your morale to like beat well, again, we're not at the end of the season, but beat another strong powerhouse of Mercedes. And you know, these next couple of races that could flip-flop a couple times even, and I think really the title fight at the minute is between Ferrari and Mercedes. It's like one to kind of watch out for the constructors, so it'll be interesting to kind of see where that goes throughout the season. But I lastly kind of wanted to mention the midfield surprises, as I put it. I mentioned, Liam Lawson had his best F1 finish with P6, but a team that you hardly ever see on the racetrack because they're doing so badly and at the back and the cameras are not on them. We had Sauber in the double points, not just one, double points. We had Nico Hülkenberg in P9 and also Bortoleto P8, his first F1 points, and was also battling with his manager Fernando Alonso. I mean, just a great result for the team. Just like, how do you feel about this, Daniela? Because I was so shocked when I saw the finish. I was like, wait, there, P8 and P9? Is this a mistake? Like, what has happened to this team?
I've never seen more of Bortoleto than I did this race. I felt like he was just in so many battles, and there was so much like so much footage of him that I was like, yes, go on, Gabby, get that airtime. And then I kind of like had almost forgotten that it was because he was fighting for points, and not only like a singular point, like decent points, and the fact that the team came away with a good handful of points, which I think was needed. We've seen Sauber struggle for years now. This is not a new thing. We've seen them be constantly at the back of the grid for such a long time, even when Kimi Räikkönen was part of the team. So I'm just so happy that they came home with points, and that Bortoleto has finally got his first points of the season and of his F1 career. I think it's a very special race for him. And as you said, I think kind of topped it off by fighting his manager, Fernando Alonso.
I thought it was so funny when they were all in the paddock, and you just kind of saw Fernando like pat him on the back and be like, that was a good fight, like that was some entertainment. And it just shows that, you know, Bortoleto does have this talent and does have the skill to get up there in the points and to have these amazing battles. I think sometimes when you're in a car that just doesn't have the capacity to really do anything but go forward, you kind of forget that, like, you know, these drivers have fought hard to get into F1 and do have the skill and talent to really pull off these amazing moves. So just, you know, well done Sauber, amazing to see. And I'm pretty sure Bortoleto did get driver of the day, so it is well deserved. Because it was a cracker performance and just great entertainment all around. So next week we have Silverstone. Daniela, what are your predictions?
Oh, this is really hard. Oh, okay. Right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say that Lando Norris is going to win the British Grand Prix, which I feel like will be a special moment if he does. I'm going to say Oscar Piastri is going to finish second. And because I feel like he needs redemption from last year, I'm going to say George Russell third. Yes. Are your predictions a bit more crazy than mine? Because I feel like mine are just like very like bog standard. I didn't really like go that far-fetched.
I'm going to say Oscar P1 for the win. I'm going to say Lando second. And although I really want to say George P3, I'm going to say Hamilton. Because I feel like the aura of the British Grand Prix just does something to Hamilton. I just think he's so different when he's at the British Grand Prix. I don't know. There's just something, like, he just fights a lot harder. Not that he doesn't in any other race, but I'm going to hope that we see Hamilton on the podium, because I think that would just be a brilliant moment for Hamilton to be with Ferrari on the podium at the British Grand Prix. It's just going to be great. So that's where my predictions are. We shall see if they happen. Being optimistic, remaining optimistic, as Danielle has taught me. And here's like another question I don't really ask, we don't really like talk about, but I just thought of it there. Who do you think is going, if there is going to be a DNF, who do you think will DNF? Dun dun dun.
Ooh, spicy.
Throwing you on the spot.
Oh, you have really thrown me on the spot, because I really am not that sure. I really don't want it to be a British driver, not at the home Grand Prix. I don't know why.
I'm going to say,
okay.
I'm going to say Williams. It's going to be a Williams driver. And I'm going to say Alex Albon. I'm going to say it.
I'm just going to pretend you didn't say that after me saying, like, earlier, like, Williams are going to have a really good British Grand Prix. I'm just manifesting good vibes for them. I don't want it to be any British team or British drivers, and you pull that out of the bag. Okay. I don't want it to be this person, because I want them to do well, because they are one of my favourite drivers on the grid. But for some reason, there's just something speaking to me that Isaac Hadjar is going to have a poor race. And I don't know why. And I really hope it's not true. And I hope that I'm not manifesting this, and it is just the world speaking to me. So, Isaac, I really hope this doesn't happen, but I just have this uneasy feeling that you might DNF. I don't know where this has come from, because he's done quite well recently, and this is just a really random prediction, but it just was what felt right in the moment.
Well, this is Formula One. Anything can happen. If you're doing well, next race, you might not be. But we shall see this weekend if our predictions come true. Hopefully it's a good race, British Grand Prix. Hopefully the weather is raining, pouring, up and down, like Britain usually is. So
I think it will be.
See. Yeah, probably.
I have checked the forecast. It's meant to be raining.
Yes.
Classic.
Yes. Okay, I am so hyped. Guys, don't miss the British Grand Prix. And if you do miss the British Grand Prix, you can listen to our episode and you will hear all about it next week at the Fastlane Collective. Make sure to follow us, give us a review, give us a like. You know, we want to hear your opinions. Just be nice to us, please. We're just giving you our opinions, okay? Thank you so much for listening, and we will hear you next week. See you next week. Bye.
Hello, fly chick coming through. Nice to meet you. Glad you came too.